we can always access the recording for you, but I will keep you posted about that. So let's share screen first. And then go start slideshow. There we go. Okay. All right, we're cooking with gas now. So I'm going to try to keep track of just, there's only one other person that we're expecting, so we'll just see what happens. So here we are, session 2, and performance planning is the most work-intensive module of the CompDev course. So how did things go with the tasks? I know that you may not have a schedule yet, but I hope you were able to complete the yearly training plan, at least as far as scheduling. If you haven't completed it that far, that's okay. There's no points taken off. So did everybody have a look at it and time at least to explore it and see what it was all about? Yes? No? Speak up anytime you want. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll keep going then. So let's so now that you've completed the first parts of the performance planning module, you've done the goals, perhaps benchmarks, performance standards, the key performance indicators, and the gap analysis. You're ready to develop a yearly training plan. This is such a good time of year to be doing this, because we're just coming out of one season, and we're kind of many of you will be in a transition period at the moment. So this is a really good time to undertake this, because you'll be working not as if, you will be doing the work in preparation for the coming season. So it's way better to do it now, the module now, than it is to do it, say, in September or December, well into your season being underway. So the objective is to develop the yearly training plan. And the process for doing this is completion of the workbook and the performance planning Excel template, or something that you develop yourself, or a similar template. As you complete the workbook, you will actually be completing the performance planning template. The workbook takes you through it step by step. So there are questions in the workbook that will help you increase your understanding. And then as you complete each activity in the workbook, you'll actually be filling in your performance planning Excel document. So that's good. And one thing that I want to stress is that our objective is to ensure that you successfully become certified. CompDev certification is required now at national competitions, and you all have the capability of coaching at that level. You're among our sport's most dedicated and skilled coaches, and we want to make sure that you're able to complete this module in order to give your athletes what they need. So I'm available, and I'll stress it again towards the end of the presentation, I'm available for any assistance that you need. I try to be fairly responsive. Sometimes on the weekend, I may not get to my laptop, but during the week, I'm on it a lot. So this is the old diagram of developing a performance plan. So just to review, you've set your goals, you've determined what performance factors and key performance indicators you need. You've assessed the current skills versus the performance standards and the KPIs. And now you're ready to create a plan with the coach team and perhaps support staff if you have that. You know where the gaps in your team's performance are and what needs to be done to close those gaps. So what you're going to accomplish in this module is you're going to build your yearly training plan. You'll be able to identify the training emphasis, identify the objectives in the yearly training plan, sequencing of training objectives, training abilities over a training block, quantify the yearly training plan, adjust the volume and intensity, adjust exercises in your for example, in your practice plan, quantifying the training week, modulating the training load, and ensuring optimal recovery, all while monitoring training. And we're going to talk about each of these individually. So this is an overview of what is in your training plan. You can see that the time, that the weeks are here. There's a preparation period, competition period, and transition. You set your peak event where you want your team to be at their best, and you work backwards from that to determine the time allocation. And then you plan forward to determine optimal progression. So you've identified the weeks in the year. You know the dates may not be possible right now, but when you have dates, you'll enter them working backwards from the event, as I said, so that the team peaks at the appropriate time. Once you've defined the periods and phases, you can then work forward with planning. When will the team begin general preparation? Off-ice training, how many sessions? When does specific training begin, and how many sessions are included there? What emphasis will be placed on the performance factors being trained? These are all the factors that you need to develop your plan. So purposes and timing of periods. The preparation period ensures the athletes are in the best condition they can be before they face the demands of a busy competitive year. Obviously, this increases their stamina, but can also help prevent and rehab injuries. In the competition period, training is more specific and gradually simulates the intensity and builds the skills required for actual competition. The transition period is when competitions are over. It gives athletes time to rest and recover. During this period, athletes have a opportunity to participate in active rest, perhaps taking up other fun sports or activities to give their minds and bodies a rest. The period can be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month or longer. If your competitive season ended early, for example, you didn't meet your ultimate goal, then the team could consider continuing training. So when you you got to the end of February and maybe the competitive season was over, you still had ice for the month of March. So maybe that's a time that you consider working on some of the gaps that were identified in the competitive season while there's still ice available. So breaking down the annual plan, in the preparatory period, there are two phases, the general phase and the specific phase. The competitive period is comprised of the pre-competitive period and the main competitive period. The transition period is the shortest and does not require phases. So the general preparation phase, the recommended length is 6 to 8 weeks, but it could be more. So if you lose ice at the end of March, you have April, May, maybe into June even to work on you'd have April for your transition, for example. And then you'd have May and June to work on general preparation, possibly into July. So the objectives are a general development of physical, motor, and mental athletic abilities, acquisition of new technical abilities and skills, consolidation of already acquired technical and tactical abilities. Training methods could be a large proportion of general activities and exercises, small proportion of specific and competition activities and exercises. Average intensity in this phase is lower than that of later phases. This is the time for strength and conditioning, working with a personal trainer or expert who is familiar with curling's physical requirements. An example of acquiring new skills might be core training to improve body position and technique for brushing, or developing explosive lower body power to throw more takeout weight. The real focus in this phase is general strength and conditioning to improve skills on the ice. Working with a registered dietitian might be advisable, as well as general mental toughness training. The specific preparation phase, the recommended length for this is 3 to 5 weeks or more. So we're moving into July and August. Progressive development of physical conditioning adapted to curling, specific development of the primary physical, motor, and mental athletic abilities required in the sport, and the acquisition of new tactical abilities and knowledge. So going through game situations that you ran into in the previous season, setting up a tactical game plan, end by end, if your team's at that level. Training methods, there's a greater proportion of specific or competition exercises, and there's a decrease in the proportion of general activities and exercises. This phase requires more emphasis on training skills directly related to curling. So that's why it's called specific. Glen Polly's sweeping trainer is a good example of specific training, and I have a slide just to show you what that is. The athletes use the mobile trainer to get their bodies into the correct position for brushing and are able to employ the appropriate footwork. So it's dryland training that simulates the on-ice physical requirements. Time can be spent off ice focusing on strategy and tactics, team relationships, communication, and mental toughness. So this is Glen Polly's trainer. You can see that it's a device on wheels. It's got 2 handles on it, and then the athlete bends over, and you can see here just kind of what the footwork is, kind of over in front and behind, in front and behind. And you can also see that the core strength is really employed in this. It's best used on, for example, the infield of a baseball field. So it's best used on gravel rather than on pavement, because there's a little bit more resistance. Thought that was just kind of interesting. So the pre-competition phase is 2 to 3 weeks or more. It prepares athletes for future competitions, consolidates already acquired abilities, there's an increase in activity intensity to be at the competition level of intensity at the end of the phase. A large proportion of specific or competition exercises, and small proportion of general activities and exercises. So you're not abandoning the physical training that was in the general phase, but that's being reduced, obviously, because of time and focus. The participation in a few preparatory and non-official competitions. So during this phase, you should be able to get back on the ice and really start to consolidate the gaps in performance that you've identified. Competitions may be viewed as training events rather than competitive events, and that's important when you're filling out your training to competition ratio. Try new techniques and tactics in situations with few consequences on your outcome goals. So if you're going into a summer spiel, could be a fun spiel for everybody else, but maybe you're going into it as a training opportunity. Emphasis is now on ice with a move to maintenance of strength and conditioning. The regular competition phase, so your objectives are to achieve your performance goals, stabilization of or decrease in the quantity of work done during practices, and stress management and emotional control when the outcome is important. The training methods would include a very large proportion of specific or competition exercises and a small proportion of general activities, unless the latter is required to correct persistent shortcomings. Practice simulation of situations likely to be encountered in major competitions. So this phase focuses on simulating the competitions that you've identified as important. You're trying to duplicate the performance and intensity the athletes will experience at those competitions. By this phase, you may have experimented with strategy and tactics and made decisions about what works and what doesn't. Technical skills at this point should be very close to being consolidated. Anything that is changing at this point would just simply be fine-tuning. Major competition phase. So achievement of performance goals when the stakes of competition are high. Stress management and emotional control is very important. Recovery from fatigue and stress. Training methods, exercises, and activities are intended to refine preparation for these major competitions. And you need to insert frequent breaks in practices so as to avoid fatigue and maintain a high degree of intensity. So the volume will go down, but the intensity goes up. In the regular competition phase, there may have been a flurry of competitions and teams vying for CTRS or junior tour points. You may have entered many of these competitions. They could be feeling fatigued and have competing priorities such as work or school. You want to approach the major competition phase with confidence and be adequately rested and recovered. If possible, competitions should be spaced out to allow recovery, and practices should be confidence building with only minor tweaks. The transition period, it's variable. It's all about recovery and regeneration, healing of injuries, decrease in the length, frequency, and intensity of sport activities. You often get curling athletes who are well-rounded and maybe have an off-season sport, curling off-season sport that they're very good at, and they want that intensity and they want to compete. So this is something that you would consider and perhaps build a little bit longer transition period for them. Active rest, large proportion of general activities and exercises, participation in activities other than organized competitive activities. But as I say, when you've got a multi-talented athlete, that's really hard to control. So you just need to work with what you've got. So you also want them to participate in sports with different physical and motor requirements, hopefully without the competition and without the stress. So now we're going to get into building your yearly training plan. So on the website, and we can have a look at them later, there are examples of the yearly training plans that you can complete. The performance planning template for curling is a document that has all the required elements, but you can design your own plan as long as it has the required elements. And I've also filed the matrix for the yearly training plan. That's what we use to measure your yearly training plan. It's filed in the performance planning module, so you can have a look at that. And if you wanted, if the template that's provided does not work for you, design your own. You'll know what needs to be included. The coach workbook beginning at 3.5 has detailed steps for the completion of the performance planning template. So the YTP outlines the program structure based on training and competition opportunities. It identifies appropriate measures to promote athlete development within your program. It integrates yearly training priorities. It organizes and sequences training priorities and objectives. And it develops a tapering and peaking program in preparation for important competitions. Once you know what competitions you're entering, you can work backwards to slot in training and practice sessions. Appropriate measures include everything you will do to develop the different performance factors. Recognizing what the priorities are and building them into the program appropriately. For example, taking advantage of ice availability as early as possible and using that time to test performance rather than emphasizing winning. Building your plan so that adaptations are continuous and weekly skills development becomes routine. Tapering and peaking are important and must be demonstrated in your plan. Things to remember. So start by completing the microcycles, weeks of the year, starting with the general preparation period. Record the competitions you expect to enter, beginning with the latest competition in your season, and work backwards from there. The Excel document is not protected, so you can change it to suit your program. Use the long-term curling development model, which is also on the website, and the annual plan evaluation matrix to guide your planning. Your yearly training plan is not due immediately. You have time to identify competitions and work backward from there. You'll have the opportunity to compare your work to the evaluation matrix and ensure that it meets all expectations. I'm also available to have a look at your plan prior to submission if you wish. So if you get it all done and you want me to have a look at it, I will take it and compare it to the matrix, provide you with feedback. And then once you've adopted the feedback or not, then you would submit it, and we can go back and forth on this. It's not a one-time have a look kind of thing. I don't mind helping you along with it. So the training to competition ratio. It's important to ensure that athletes have an appropriate amount of training compared to competition. On the template, on the training to competition ratio tab, there is information about what the appropriate training to competition ratio is, depending on what stage of the long-term curler development model your athletes are at. So it provides guidance on training to competition ratios depending on the age and stage. So you should have all read the definitions of training and competition beginning on page 65. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to get together and discuss how these definitions might fit with your program. So do you all have the same definition of competition activities? Is every competition activity is every activity going to be a competition activity, or are some of those competition activities going to be training? For example, league games or competitions in the early in the season for your stage of athlete, are these competitions or training opportunities? Breakout rooms, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. I'm going to end the show for now and we'll come back. Maybe I'm going to end it. Okay. And now I'll stop sharing for the moment and we'll go into breakout rooms. So you're automatically going to go into the breakout room. So maybe one of you would be willing to be kind of the facilitator sort of, and the other one will take notes, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. I hope that'll give you enough time to have a bit of a discussion about it. Okay, so here we go. I'll see you in 5 to 7 minutes. You'll get a warning when the time is almost up. Great. How'd it go?
Good.
Good. Just gonna say, don't everybody talk at once. All right, we just have a few more people waiting to come back in. They must be having a really good discussion. Oh, here they come. One more person to, there we go. Okay. So how did it go? Do you have athletes at different ages and stages and therefore different interpretations of competitive and training opportunities?
Yes, I can speak to that actually, because in our room, there were 5 of us and 4 of the coaches are coaching junior teams and I'm coaching a men's competitive team. So for us, the competition phase starts in September with the first cash deal and goes right until the provincial playdowns and or the Brier. But with the junior coaches, understandably, those events in the fall are considered more preparatory phase rather than competition phase.
Excellent, good. What about the other group? Tim? Oh, you're muted, Tim.
Oh, I could speak on that a little bit. We
Okay.
went through all 5 of us. Ted actually stated something here, quality versus quantity, really, for practicing. And so starting early in the season, make sure you have lots of breaks or sufficient breaks, let's say, because it is a long season if you start early. We're usually on the ice in August, except we're lucky. We have Oakville, we have Waterloo, all those areas, so we can hop on at that time. But even it's a long season, 6 months, a long season for some teams, younger ones especially. But we were all using the ratio 40-60, 60-40, that type of thing. Or if you're on the island, so Newfoundland, you use what you can have. Like you find what you can, access.
And that's a really good point. So, early in the season, if your team is curling in a league and you don't have access to those competitive opportunities, curling in a league early in the season might be training.
Sure.
But later on in the season, it becomes competition. So you make it more intense by aiming for wins and losses or to score set number of points or to not give away big ends, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a really good point. Good. Anything else? Anybody else want to chime in?
We also have university students, or I do, all 4 of mine are university students. So that takes work, and some of them are working. So scheduling all that, you have to really work at that.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And we'll get into the cost stressors and income information shortly. So I'm going to share my screen again. And we will. So we've talked about the training to competition ratio a little bit, and then now we're going to talk about identifying the training emphasis. So it shows the major priorities, and we'll have a look at this in a minute. I have an example to show you. It shows the major priorities for the different training blocks. It helps coaches decide the best, most efficient time to address the gaps. The emphasis is based on the main gaps identified in the gap analysis. the percentage for the performance factors in each microcycle should total 100%. The emphasis can be identified for each microcycle in the plan, but it's more likely the emphasis will vary from phase to phase. So here's an example. And what I don't worry too much about the numbers. Down here is where all the numbers should add up to 100%, because I know this is really small and it's difficult to see. But what I wanted you to see was the graph. So when you fill in these percentages, this graph will automatically auto-populate. So right here, this kind of pinky color is psychology, the green color is physical, purple is tactical, and then this lovely grapey kind of color is technical. So it will automatically auto-populate. Is this, so let's say you're designing your own template, you don't have to build this in if you don't want. If you're using the template that Curling Canada provides, it will automatically auto-populate. But the matrix doesn't get into this level of detail. The matrix wants to see the percentages and that they're applied appropriately. So off season, there's more of in the general preparation phase, there's more of an emphasis on physical training and psychology. And then as you move into your more competitive phases, that there's more emphasis on technical and tactical. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So the training terminology, I think this is all in the reference material. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but volume, obviously for curling specific training, the measurement will be mostly volume, the length of practice, length of time, brushing, that kind of thing. The intensity, it's not only the effort that's required, but it's also simulating the intensity of competition. So the fact that you're out on arena ice and there's crowds involved, or you have to travel, that feels like there's a lot at stake. So the volume may be lower, closer to an important competition, but the intensity might be higher. So when you're choosing and prioritizing training objectives, align objectives with the training emphasis. So in the general phase, that's where you're working on all the warm side of the glass opportunities. The challenge is to manage multiple objectives while developing meaningful progressions. It's better to fully achieve 1 or 2 objectives than to partly achieve 9 or 10. So when you're looking at your gap analysis and trying to decide what gaps you want to address, take the easy wins early in the season. So maybe it's equipment. And then as you move into the specific phase, take 1 or 2, 3 at the very most that you can work on. And those will change as well as the athlete makes the adaptations. Then you can add up to a point. So you want to prioritize using numbers. So physical abilities, number 1 would be to develop, 2 is to consolidate, and 3 is to maintain. When it's the technical and tactical abilities, 1 is to acquire, 2 is to consolidate, and then 3 is to refine. The ancillary factors depends on the team and individual needs. So this is just an example of in the physical, in the general preparation phase. Physical here, we want a moderate priority, and then it's going to slowly become a lower priority as we maintain. Whereas when we get to, and with athletic abilities, balance, line of target, all of these, depending on the age and stage of your athlete, you should be refining these. But when it comes to the finer skills, the fine-tuning mechanism, sweeping judgment, shot tolerance, those are skills that maybe you're going to be acquiring and then consolidating. And these will change as well as you move through the season. So modulating the training load, the period and phase of the plan will shape the training load. Early in the season, the volume may have more focus than intensity, and the emphasis is going to be on strength and conditioning. Moving into on ice, when there's an opportunity to increase the volume of practices, intensity might be lower. But then, as we mentioned earlier, during the competitive period, the volume of training might be lower, but intensity needs to be higher to simulate game situations. So microcycles and mesocycles. The microcycle is 3 to 6 days of a variety of training opportunities and stimulus, followed by 1 day of recovery. So you can just look at a microcycle in our plan as a week. The mesocycle is 2 to 6 weeks of training, providing progressive loading and then unloading. So an example of a mesocycle would be the period before a major competition when rest and recovery are important. So you want to reduce the volume of practice and activities, but maintain the intensity. One thing I want to mention as well, because it's often missed, it's in the workbook, but sometimes it gets missed, is when you're looking at your competitions, at the length of the competitions, if there's any travel, so if you have an away competition, it's a 3-day competition, but you need a day to get there and a day to get home, include those 2 days in the competitive schedule. So count those your travel time as part of the competition. And that gets built into your training to competition ratio as well. So developing the performance plan, implementing the plan can happen with each period and phase. Testing and assessing is ongoing during games and practices for some skills and off ice for other skills. Revise the plan depending on the results of testing and assessing. Perhaps some goals have been achieved. Now the plan needs to be revised to maintain the attainment of goals, such as performance goals, while moving on to the development of the skills that you've identified in the gap analysis. So that's where we're back there. And we continue on around the circle. Once the plan is drafted, it's not static. You don't have to wait until next year to change it. You can, if you achieve a goal, maybe your goal was only provincial, not only provincials. Maybe your goal was provincials and you achieved that goal. Now you might want to go back and revise the plan so that you've got nationals built in. Goals can be adjusted up or down. Measure, measure, measure. Get athlete feedback and use the various worksheets in the reference material to assess your plan. And don't forget about the individual athlete performance plan as well. That's not part of what you will be evaluated on. That's not part of the matrix, but it's helpful to your yearly training plan. Building recovery into your plan. Competition can create a stressful environment. The greater the number of competitions, the more athletes feel pressure to peak for each one. Added pressure often equals increased stress. Without rest, regeneration, and recovery, the athlete may experience staleness, overtraining, and physical and mental exhaustion. I worked with a team for several seasons, but one season in particular, this was an adult team, and the goal was to qualify for the Olympic trials. and there were two accountants on the team, two CAs. And they had done the math and decided that the best way to earn points, the points required to qualify for the trials, was to enter as many competitions as possible where CTRS points were available. So they were curling almost every weekend from September until the end of November and traveling. This was an adult team, and it was ultimately their decision, even though we talked about the stress that this would cause on them physically, emotionally, mentally. The outcome was that they did qualify for the Road to the Roar, and in debriefing the season, they identified that lack of recovery was a factor. At the last competitions before the decisions were made as to who qualified and who didn't, they looked tired and they seemed to lack focus. But they were an adult team, and you can only suggest. So stressors and recovery: avoid overtraining, identify the optimum amount of competition for your athlete's development. Training leads to higher adaptation than competition. Use the step loading method for the best progression training adaptation, and alternate high with medium and low training sessions to avoid fatigue. The step loading model of training permits a progressive overload that is intermingled with stages of unloading. So high load with some low load sessions. In the 4 weeks prior to a competition, the first 3 weeks might include a higher volume of training and intensity in practices. But in the week just before the competition, bring down the volume, but maintain the intensity. Keep practices positive by building confidence, but also trying to simulate the intensity. Call the shots that have been practiced. So the stressors, cost, and recovery income worksheets, those are part of the template as well. They look complicated, but when you actually sit down to do them, they're not that bad. They help assess how much time and energy is being expended by the athlete in preparing for performance. The recovery income worksheet helps assess what the athlete is doing to enable their recovery from the cost of competing. So you complete these two worksheets for a period which includes an important competition. If the cost exceeds the income too much, you may want to revise your plan. So the stressors and cost worksheet include things like how many practices, how many games per week, what are the other stressors in the athlete's life. So Tim, you gave an example of university or work. You know, not every student can afford to pay for university without having a part-time job somewhere along the line. So those are all examples of stressors and costs. What is the cost? And there's a formula there that will help you calculate it. And then the recovery income worksheet includes things like nutrition, sleep, extracurricular activities. What are they doing outside of curling to help themselves recover? Vacation, all that kind of stuff. And again, the sheet will help you calculate the cost and the income. Try it first with a competition that may not mean so much, a competition that's slightly less important than for a major competition. Analyze what you can do to ensure that the recovery income is greater than the stressors and costs. Does it mean more sleep? Does it mean fewer practices or shorter practices? So adjusting your performance plan, monitoring and assessing the athlete's performance will help identify emerging issues such as injuries, communication issues, technical skill changes, etc. Analysis of achievement of performance and process goals can provide further insight. And once identified, the coach can recommend improvements and timelines for implementation. I worked with an adult team at a Scotties, and one player on the team developed a significant muscle strain, which inhibited her ability to brush. And she was in a great deal of pain trying to brush. So we got her into physiotherapy and treatment began. But the issue was that she had worked, and they all had worked extremely hard to get to the Scotties. And now she didn't want to have to take a step back because of this injury. And it was an extremely difficult decision. We had a great fifth player, but she finally came to the decision herself without anybody having to say, you will sit out. And she only had to sit out 2 or 3 games. And when she came back, she was able to complete the competition. So it was a distraction. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it was something that the team had to overcome in the heat, right in the heat of the competition. Fortunately, it developed early in the competition, so she had time to have it treated, and it all worked out, and the team came together extremely well. But it's an example of a situation that you can be faced with. So methods for measuring your plan: you can score drills in practice, keep a log of scoreboards, which I'm sure you all do. If you have the ability to track shooting percentages, have athletes journal their feelings before, during, and after games and competitions. When I worked with Team Fleury, they were the best at journaling. So they had a team journal, and they also had individual journals. But before every game, we would sit down and complete 1 page in the journal about their feelings, how they felt before the game, what they'd eaten, if they were rested. We talked about who they were playing, what their experience was with them in previous encounters. And then after the game, it was part of our debrief as well to sit down and log the scoreboard, talk about what worked, what didn't work, and what we were going to take into the next game. Monitor for injuries. Have athletes keep a nutrition journal, especially if you have somebody on the team who has some kind of if they have allergies or diabetes. Keeping a journal is very helpful, but keeping a nutrition journal also helps the athlete understand, hey, if I go out and have a Big Mac and an extra large fries and a chocolate milkshake and then try to curl, what impact is that having on my body compared to having something a little less heavy? Journals monitoring physical training effects can be motivating as well. So if they're working with a personal trainer and there is some measurement going on, they can look back to when they started to where they are today and see that there have been improvements. So what's next? You're going to work on completing the workbook, but that's not expected to be done in one sitting. That's something that could take you weeks. It could take you a couple of months. It really can't be completed until you have a good idea of what your competition schedule is going to be. If you're using the Excel document, it has tabs for benchmarks, current athletes, the sport audit, gap analysis, linking gaps, the yearly training plan, the competition ratio, cost benefit analysis, 3 micro plans, and a taper plan. So the micro plans would be for a week, and the taper plan is in the days before a major competition. As I said before, you can use whatever format you wish as long as you meet all of the requirements set out in the matrix. And if you also wish, we could establish study groups for you to work together and consult with a mentor coach. So if you are having difficulty with the template, we can put people together, or I can help. We want you to be successful in this. So start on it. Keeping in mind that the general preparation phase and physical training may be something that you don't design. It could be that your athletes are going to go to a gym. When I worked with Team Flory, they went to a hockey center in Sudbury, and they worked with a personal trainer there, and it was quite interesting because they were able to get on the artificial ice and practice brushing. They used a slap shot machine for their push-pull training on brushing, so it was very interesting. I also mentioned earlier, you can send me your portfolio before you submit it for evaluation, and I'll review it to make sure that you've met all the requirements in the matrix. And let me know by email if you would like to be part of a study group. I'm available as a resource too if you have any questions. So that's kind of the end of it. So we'll, I thought if you wanted, we could have a quick look at the e-learning site. I know we did this in session 1, but just as a bit of a review, or have you all kind of had a good look through it and you know what's there? Crickets. Okay, so it seems like you've maybe had a good look through it. The LTCD is there. There's the matrix. That's what you will be using for your evaluation. Oh, there's the long-term curler development model. And then the yearly training templates and samples are here. I know you've already looked at it. This is the e-learning. This is the template if you wish to use for your yearly training plan. These are other examples, and then there's this yearly training plan booklet, which has several examples of other training plans. Let's just pull.
Andrea,
Yes.
I don't know if you remember when we spoke, when we were looking at the matrix, there were certain page numbers that were relevant to the yearly training plan. Do you remember what those were? You asked me to remind you during the session so you could let us know.
Oh,
Because it's that matrix has several things in there.
oh, did it? Because I was trying to just let me pull it up.
Pages
here.
16 to something. I was just trying to look through my notes and see it, but I don't.
Oh, right. Yes, that's right. That's right. So I did have to put the whole thing down there. So go all the way down, portfolio evaluation and annual plan. So it starts. You have to go down to the competition development evaluation tool, portfolio evaluation. That's really where it starts. Page 1. And then this is all annual plan to page 7. And after that, it's into manage a program. So page 1 to 7 are all the requirements. So it goes into the weekly program, during the week preceding an important competition. Okay. Does that make sense, Gayleen? Is that what we talked about?
Yeah,
Good.
that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay, so go back here, I hope. Yeah. So everything else I think is there, and I guess I can't emphasize it enough. We really want you to be successful in this. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that that happens. Can I stop sharing now, or does anybody have any other questions that you'd like clarification on? Oh, the other thing I'm going to stop sharing. But the other thing I was going to say, one person was having difficulty with the template, opening it up. So you need to download it. It's best to download it and keep saving it as you're working on it. If you have difficulty with the download or something isn't working, let me know, because I will send you, I'll email you a copy of it. And a lot of it, there's a lot that there are formulas there. You can change the formulas if they don't suit you. Change it any way you want. Okay, Eugene, you look like you're going to ask a question. Oh, you're still muted.
There we go, I'm mute. Okay,
Okay.
so I was the one who asked the question last time about the best way to do this. I did download both the coach's manual or the
Mhm.
workbook, I'm sorry, and the all the worksheets.
Yeah,
And filling those in, saving them as I go. You're answering the questions in the workbook as you go, is that right? Also?
yes, yes,
Right.
yeah.
Answering the questions in the workbook, and then workbook, and then at the end of the day, that gets submitted to you if we choose.
Yeah, you just upload it back onto the website. And I get notification automatically when you've uploaded something.
Okay.
So I can have a look at it. And then with your performance planning template, if you would like me to have a look at it before you upload it, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. So we figure out a way to do that also.
Yes,
Yeah.
We could just email that to you as an attachment.
yes, yeah, just email it to me and I'll go through the matrix on it. And if it's, you know, I'll if there's lots that needs perhaps to be discussed, we'll discuss it. And if not, I'll put in my thoughts and we'll go from there.
So just a question here. So on the team that I work with, we have two shift workers. We have a nurse and another healthcare professional who work days, nights, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get into this weekly, what do you do? When do you do it? Well, 3 of the 7 days you're sleeping in the daytime while the others are doing something else. And when you're awake in the nighttime, you're not necessarily doing what you'd be awake in the daytime. So it's a little bit, it is a bit of a different world when you have those type of night day working things, but we'll figure it out the best way.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make it complicated. The other complication can be too, I worked with well, all the teams, the high performance teams that I've worked with have all had 1 or 2 or 4 players who are not in the same location.
Right.
And so they viewed their competitions when they went to the slams and the cash spiels, etc., they viewed those as training opportunities. And they were practicing on their own and they had scheduled, you know, they knew what their tasks were at every practice. But they really only had the chance to play together when they were at a competition. So that can make things complicated as well.
Okay.
Excuse me, Andrea?
Yes.
Yeah, you have here team camp versus practice.
Yes.
Now, would you explain I mean, is there a timeline that separates a team camp from a practice or not?
No, not really. I think the team camp would be a situation where you don't have all 4 players in the same location. And so you're bringing them together for a weekend.
Okay.
Team McCarville is a really good example of that. They'll do 2 or 3 team camps as soon as they can get on the ice. So that would be a team camp, whereas a practice, everybody's lives in this, you know, within close enough proximity that everybody can get together for a team practice.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, sure. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. Oh, you're all so polite and so quiet and well, if there's nothing else, then I think we'll wrap it up. But please stay in touch. Let me know how things are going. And if there's anything that I can do to help, short of writing your plan for you, I'm more than happy to help.
Oh, Andrea, excuse me.
Yes.
With the Excel spreadsheet that
Mhm.
we're using, or the one that you recommended, it says to start with the dates. And if you input all the dates, well, then it automatically lays out from the first date over. Now it says day, month, year, I think, on the Excel spreadsheet. Although I find month, day, year actually works.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So it's more of an update. I experimented with it. It seemed like it was, I'm not sure, but that seemed to work
Okay,
for me.
I'll
So
have a look at
yeah,
that.
you can have a look at it.
Yeah,
Anyways,
so day, month, year versus month, day, year. Okay, I
yeah,
will have a
day,
look.
month, year, I think it says on it that that's what you're supposed to use.
Yeah.
Well, month, a year actually works.
Oh, so you're the first person to point that out.
Well, you can check. I might be wrong, but
No, but
anyways, it worked for me. So anyways.
good, good. Well, if I had a prize, I'd give it to you.
Oh,
So
no, this is fine.
well done, Tim. Good.
That's good.
You can also change that setting in Excel. So that's maybe why is the instructions are telling you one way to do it, but your Excel spreadsheet is set up for the other format.
Well, thank
Oh,
you
there
very
you
much.
go.
Murray.
Good. Thanks very much, Murray.
Thank you.
All right. We're all good for now.
Well, thank you.
Yep,
Thank you
thank
very much. That was great. So I'm going to stop the recording here.